you for coming, everyone. And Riley's so awesome. And I'm sorry to interrupt. Well, thank you for coming. We really appreciate your being here and supporting Story Night. I'm Terry Lawrence. I'm the board treasurer. This is such a wonderful organization, and we've been working really hard to keep things together during the last 2 years. Everybody's had a tough time, I know. So we're really happy to have you here in the house. Love to see all the masks and the sparkling eyes. I am here to introduce our fabulous host and artistic director, Jodi Eichelberger.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Story. We're very happy to see your faces here, to be in person. I think some people misunderstood and saw the theme going home, stories of returning, and they're still at home. But they can watch our YouTube channel and catch the show later, I guess. First, I want to thank this beautiful human right here, Riley Johnson. Thank you so much. And is this a particularly busy season for a harpist? No, it's not. The people don't want angels from above playing harps.
Maybe before COVID.
Maybe before COVID. Yeah. Harps in the next room, I guess. Yeah. Did you have a good holiday?
Yeah.
Good. We also want to thank our sponsors, and tonight is an unusual show, actually, because we do have our season sponsor, Boise Group. Thank you very much, Boise Group. But normally, we also have a show sponsor. We don't have an official show sponsor tonight, but what ended up happening is we did our Giving Tuesday campaign on the socials, and some of you participated in that, and that actually is our show sponsor tonight, are the people who gave during that Facebook and other things. We actually got more than our normal. A normal show sponsor is $550, and I think we got $670, so we're extra sponsored tonight. So thank you to you guys. And the last group of people that I would like to thank are the Story subscribers. A few of you are here tonight. If you're a Story subscriber, just want to raise your hand or stand up, or there's one right there in the middle, and two right over here. Oh, we actually had seats for you over on the side, but you look like you're perfect right there. Love that. And so Story subscribers, anybody can be a Story subscriber. It's a monthly sustainer, and included in your Story subscription are tickets to shows. So that you can get those every month and automatically be here with us. And we really appreciate that. That has helped a lot too. So stories of going home, stories of returning. That's what it is. So I am from Boise, but I went away for 25 years. And so I have never missed a Christmas holiday, though. I have always come back here for the holidays. Boy, am I grateful, though, that now I'm living here and don't have to travel to get to Boise. I did have some pretty harrowing travel experiences. Some of them were kind of fun, some of them weren't. Probably the most dramatic is that part of the time that I was away, I was living in New York, and I was performing on Broadway, and I was the only person in the cast who was not local, as I found most of the performers there seemed to have family either in New Jersey or in New York. And so none of them really needed to go away for the holidays. So I put in my request for, at least a week away from the show, so that I could come home for the holidays. And I turned it into the stage manager, and I thought, I'm the only one in this cast that needs to travel. Everybody else can be with their family and still do the show, whatever. Well, my request was denied. They said, it's our busiest time, everything is sold out, we don't want you to leave, we need you here, you have to stay. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss my very first Christmas in Boise, this is crazy. Well, actually, what ended up happening is I quit. I did have another job lined up, which was actually a TV production that was going to be somewhere else, and so there was a gap between it. But it was quite interesting to go out on that stage on December 24th, and I did the show. I finished my last scene, and I didn't even stay for the curtain call because my flight out of Liberty Airport was so tight. The show usually ended at 10 p.m. My flight was supposed to leave at 11:15. So I think my last scene was at about 9:40, and I had my suitcase. I packed up my apartment in Prospect Park and in Park Slope, and I had my suitcase in my dressing room. I did my last line. I ran up the stairs to my dressing room, took off my costume, grabbed my suitcase, and ran out the stage door, out to the street, got in a taxi, and jetted off to the airport. And in the taxi, the director of the show called me to thank me for my time on the show and say how great it was to work with me. I'm like in the tunnel on the way to the airport, like, oh yes, thank you, bye. And then I made my flight, landed in Boise, and my brother-in-law picked me up and at the time they lived in Idaho City. So I think I arrived about 3:30 in the morning on Christmas morning, but I made it. Many years before that, I, like many people, went to school in Oregon, to college, and would drive across the Blue Mountains to Boise to be here with my family. And that is not a fun drive. And if anyone had to do it these last couple of weeks, oh, that must have been really, the time I'm thinking of was similar to that because there was a lot of weather. I was driving the first car and really only one of two cars I've owned. It was a Datsun 210 SL hatchback. And I'm driving it down up the Blue Mountains and lots of snow, hard to see. I'm kind of squiggling all over the road. And I look in my rearview mirror at one point, and it looks like the spaceship from E.T. is descended on the ridge of the mountain and is kind of moving towards me at quite a great speed. And I'm in the only lane I can see, which is the right lane. And I see this E.T. ship in my rearview mirror, the lights reflecting off into my eyes, and it's getting closer and closer and closer. And eventually I recognize it as a snowplow because I can see the snow just like flying to the side. And I'm like, what, am I supposed to move over? Like, is it gonna be behind me, or what's supposed to happen here? I haven't learned the snowplow etiquette. So I finally am like, well, he does not look like he's slowing down. So I moved into the left side, which wasn't even a lane. It was just white, no road. And I got over there and almost immediately lost control of the car and started spinning in circles. And so I'm getting a real good look at E.T. here at this point. Just swinging around and, oh, there you go. Oh, hi again. And I swear that snowplow did not slow down at all. It just went, flew past me. My car finally stopped, and fortunately I stayed on the road. I don't remember which direction I was facing once it stopped, but I figured out how to get back in my lane, and now it was plowed, so that was nice. But I was a little nervous about having just lost control of the car. I was like, I don't feel safe. I'm gonna pull over on the side, and I have some chains I bought at Fred Meyer that are in the trunk, so I will get those chains out and put them on. And I got the chains out, and I've never put chains on before. And also, my style of handling mechanical things, and cars in particular, is if it breaks, I see if I can pull it off, and then I throw it away. I once drove the car, they changed the ethanol level in Oregon, and my car would stall every time I stopped, and I'd have to restart it. I did that for 6 months, and I ran a lot of red lights. But they changed the ethanol again, and then my car worked again. So it works. You just keep going, and it eventually fixes itself. So I didn't know how to put chains on, really. And a trucker stopped, too. And he's like, hey, you need help with that? And I was like, oh, a Christmas miracle. And so he helped me put the chains on. And I continued down the road. And I didn't really notice much difference. It still was awfully squirrely. And I'm still going, I'm thinking, gosh, when do the Blue Mountains start going down? Because I'm still going up, the snow is still intense, and I'm continuing. And I finally make it into Idaho, just barely. I think I'm like in line with New Plymouth or something, and I get a flat tire. So I go around to get the spare and open the hatch and, pull out the thing and realize, oh, the spare is already on my car. All right. And my way of replacing tires is when they blow out, I get a new tire, and then I put the new tire on, and then when another one blows out, and I go get a new tire. So they're all random tires from different periods of time. And I had just done, and this is starting to sound weirder and weirder, actually, but I was a music major, and we had just done a interpretive piece that I decided I was going to use a shadow screen on. So I'd made it out of PVC pipes and a giant sheet to cast this shadow on, and it was in the back of my car, along with everything else from my dorm room. And so I thought, it's probably not a smart idea for me to walk along the side of the freeway. This was before cell phones, so I had to go find a payphone. It's probably not a good idea to walk along the side of the road just in dark clothes. So I found my white shadow screen, and I wrapped it around so I would be glowing white. And I started walking back toward the last exit I had passed, and no one stopped for me. No one offered to help. There were no more truckers. I realized I probably did look a sight, this white, mummy ghost-looking thing walking. And I finally made it to the overpass, and there fortunately was a bar there. I come from a Southern Baptist family, and there was no drinking, and I didn't drink until I left the country, actually. So I just stayed in the very front of the bar, just looking. I was probably 19 or 20, and just kind of sat there, and I found the payphone. I called my dad, broke down on the exit 16, and sat there, and he came and picked me up. And gosh, I think we must have had to leave the car there. I don't remember what happened to the car. We did eventually get it back. And so we're at lunch at Wendy's a few weeks later, and I'm looking out at my car out in the parking lot through the Wendy's window, and I said, Dad, I have a rear wheel drive, don't I? And he's like, yes, you do. And I was like, so if you're going to put chains on a car, would you put them on the back tires or the front tires? And sure enough, that very helpful trucker had helped me put those chains on the front tires, which doesn't do anything. I can tell you, I drove 200 miles on that, and doesn't help with a flat tire either. So it's good to know what you're driving, I guess, and where you're headed, and to have people who can rescue you. And I think it would be good for you to know how we drive this show as well. So, structure of the show is 3 featured storytellers with a community story slam intermixed. And the story slam can be anyone here in the audience. You just go back to our story booth back here, sign your name, drop it in, and it's a 5-minute story inspired by our theme, which is Going Home, Stories of Returning. And that theme is actually when we've been away from here for a season and a half or so. And so when we got the green light to move back in to jump, so Going Home is kind of appropriate for the show tonight too. We decided, hey, let's treat this like we're rebooting, like we're starting again. We're unplugging and plugging back in. So we actually, all these themes for this season come from our shows back in 2010 when Story Night first started. At that time, this show would have been performed in December 2010, and it was in the Linen Building. So we are visiting those themes again as they were then. And it's been interesting already to see how the same theme applies so differently here 12 years later, if that's what it is. The other thing that can happen sometimes is someone will go to the Story Slam booth very excited to write a name and stick it in, and it turns out it's not their name. Now, if you haven't heard, we are in the age of consent. So, this is not a good idea, and so I'm just going to point that out. It happened at the last show, and it turned out to be very cute. It often does turn out to be quite cute. but sometimes it is also painful. So we don't really want to risk that happening. If you go over time with your 5-minute slam, I will start to encourage you to go home by creeping along the edge of the stage and moving closer and closer towards you. And eventually, it gets uncomfortable. Yeah. Also, our harpist may begin to tinkle the... What do you say for a harp? Not...
It is actually tinkle the strings.
It is tinkle the strings. Oh, okay. I just shouldn't pause after I say the word tinkle. And then our harpist will tinkle the strings. Yeah. Timing is important, isn't it? Yeah. In music and in life. Yeah, yeah. All right, let's get some traction here and bring up our featured storytellers in reverse order, if I remember this correctly. So the last storyteller you will hear tonight is new to the Story Night stage. Kevin Winslow is going to share a story about going home and going and going and going. Come on up to the stage, Kevin. Let's give him a hand as he comes up. There we go. And you're first up, so you can pick orange, blue, or green. And we will contemplate what that means about your personality. I think it's good. I think it's good. Our second story tonight spent 5 years in Japan and not so long ago returned home, maybe. Please welcome Laura Abbott. All right. And first up to our microphone is a storyteller who actually is returning to Story Night and was part of our inaugural season in 2010. Not this theme, so this is a new story tonight, but she was there at the very beginning. Please welcome back Elaine Ambrose.
You did. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm so excited to see all of you because we've just been home and it's fun to get out and be human again and see all my friends. And thank you. Thank you for being here. My story starts in Todos Santos, Mexico. It's on the Baja Peninsula, on the lower half of the peninsula next to the Pacific Ocean. I was there in June. And Todos Santos is made famous by the song Hotel California. There's a landmark there called the Hotel California. And the last line is, you can check out, but you can never leave. That almost happened to me. I was speaking at a writers' conference in June at a boutique hotel called Pachamama. And it was wonderful because it was totally unplugged. That meant no cell phone, no internet, and if you're going to die, it's a bad place to be in that situation. So I had given my presentation. The only place where the internet was available was in the great room where we ate and where I gave my workshops. And so I gave my workshops. I do a writing workshop about playing music, and I have the participants write their stories according to the music that prompts them. And it's always a wonderful, rewarding experience. The retreat lasted 5 days, and at the last evening, I was in my room. I had a wonderful room all by myself. I love traveling by myself. And the door opened up into a courtyard overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was lovely, and I enjoyed being there. The final night, I packed my carry-on. I have a rule when I travel. I only take enough that I can run with in an airport. So I had my little carry-on all packed and ready to go. And I went to sleep listening to the sounds of the ocean. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, someone tried to kill me. I woke. Someone was sitting on my chest. They had a pillow over my face. They were trying to kill me. I rolled and I moaned with a guttural noise from the bottom of my gut. And I started flailing my arms and I kicked my feet. And I rolled and I rolled and I finally reached over and turned on the light, expecting to see someone in my room. There was no one there. My door was still closed. I had been trying to kill myself. This was not good. I did not like the feeling. It hurt. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have internet. I did not have the strength to crawl out of my bed, to crawl into the patio, to crawl to the next door and bang to get somebody to help me. So I sat up the rest of the night. I was afraid to lie down. Finally, the sun came up. I unloaded half the stuff in my suitcase to make it lighter so I could carry it downstairs. I got dressed and made it downstairs to the great room where there was internet. I got online, got to my airline, and requested a wheelchair. I was going home. That's all I wanted, was to go home. I didn't tell anybody at the conference about what had happened to me because I thought they would take me to the hospital. And being in a Mexican hospital 3,000 miles away from my family in Idaho was not optimal. I only know two Spanish sentences. ¿Dónde está el baño? Which is, where's the bathroom? And más vino tinto, por favor. Which is more red wine, please. And these are key sentences to know in Spanish, but I didn't want to know them in a hospital. So I got on the van. They had hired a van to take me to the airport in Cabo. Cabo was 90 minutes away. So I got my little carry-on. It was much lighter now. Put on my mask and started a 12-hour journey to get home. That's all I wanted, was to get home. I arrived at the airport in Cabo. They had a wheelchair, and I really appreciate wheelchairs now. If you've ever been through security and when you have to go through all the customs in a foreign airport, they wheeled me right on by, and I just kind of waved. All those people standing in line for an hour and a half to get through security at Cabo. Another advantage of the wheelchair, first on line to the plane. I didn't know this. I'm going to have a wheelchair every time. First on line in the plane, and I finally sat down in that seat and I buckled in. First, I'd asked somebody to help me put the luggage up in the overhead bin. It was easy because it was so light, there was nothing in it. But I sat in my chair, and the moment the plane took off to leave for the United States, I fell asleep. I fell in a deep sleep because I had been up all night. I dreamed of my hometown of Wendell, Idaho. You've probably been to Wendell shopping or to see the sights. It has a population of 1,000 when I grew up there. My father was born in Wendell. My parents both attended Wendell High School. My brothers and I attended Wendell High School, and Wendell will be my final resting place. My father bought 6 cemetery plots. And both my parents have passed, my brothers have passed, and my sister's buried there. And there's 1 plot left. That's for me, and I'm not using it yet. So I dreamed about Wendell. I had a paper route in Wendell. I rode my little bicycle and delivered 70 copies of the Twin Falls Times-News because there were 70 people in Wendell who could read. Maybe it was 69, I don't know. But I had a wonderful time in Wendell on my little paper route, and I was dreaming about how I got a fear of dogs. And I would come up to these houses, and there would be these dogs chasing me and trying to bite me. And there was one big collie, and he put his big paws on my shoulder, and he had a big, ugly head, and he was making strange, guttural noises. But that was good, because it prepared me for my dates at the University of Idaho. So, I digress. The plane landed in San Francisco. And immediately I was overcome with emotion. I was back in the USA. I was going home. And again, there was a wheelchair. And they took me through customs. And for the rest of you who have been through customs at San Francisco and knows it takes 2 hours, I was just wheeled right on by, and again I waved. And got through customs. They didn't have much to look through, my luggage. I had my passport. And they got me on the plane. I was so close to getting home, and that's all I cared about. The plane took off for Boise. By this time, it had been about 8 hours, traveling with a mask on, not being able to breathe. I was still panting for air. And I asked somebody to put my luggage up. The plane took off, and we landed in Boise an hour and a half later. I'm not a crier. I was raised not to cry. I was raised on a farm. You be tough, suffer. When that plane landed in Boise, the tears started to fall. And so I had a dirty, wet mask on my face. It was like a diaper. I didn't care. I was in Boise. I asked somebody to get my luggage down, and again, there was a wheelchair. And they hauled me out, and they put me out on the curb. My granddaughter was there to pick me up. I had bribed her. I was paying her some college money if she would pick me up from the airport. She took me home. I had made it home. I ripped off my mask and threw it away. The next week brought a assortment of cardiologists and doctor's appointments and all these different tests and medications. And yes, I'd had a heart attack in Mexico. And why did you get home? I did, because I wanted to get home. I have cardiomyopathy. I have a little valve that doesn't work, and it's really irritating me. It only does what they call an ejection fraction of 30%. You need 60% if you're going to live. So I might just die right here on stage, so it would be a really hard act to follow. But I have 30%, so I've been given all these medications. I had an echocardiogram. I had an angiogram. An angiogram is where I'm lying nude in the surgery room with 5 men surrounding me, and I usually get the name of a man before I get naked in bed. I had a mask on, though, so that helped. The doctors didn't laugh. They went in through my groin, up through my body, into my heart with these instruments. And I was awake. I knew they were doing that. And I said, "Did you find Waldo?" Again, no laughter. I do believe I'm going to give a humor workshop to the cardiologist at St. Luke's Hospital. But they opened up the little valve that wasn't working and put me on different medications, which really were horrible. They really messed me up. So I had to go back for other tests, another MRI, and I'm still at 30%, which is irritating me because I like to win. So I'm going back next week for an echophysiologist. I'm learning all these big words. We got to get my heart working. I am not going to get that cemetery plot yet in Wendell. Yeah. So 2 things I learned from my vision, from my quest to get home. 1, I'm surrounded by angels. I'm so grateful for my angels. When I was suffering in my hotel room, and I called on the universe, and I called on the angels, and I called on every Bible story my mother ever taught me, "Get me home," and they got me home. I'll never see those people again. I'll never see the people who pushed my wheelchair through 3 different airports. I'll never see the kind gentleman who put my luggage down from the luggage rack. I'll never see the man who drove the van to get me to the airport. But I appreciate them, and I know they're there. The second lesson I learned from my 12-hour odyssey, I'm done with travel. I recently donated my suitcases. I grew up on a farm in Wendell, Idaho, and as I was reading the National Geographics of my grandparents, I said, I'm going to go there, and I did. I've been to Egypt, to the pyramids. I've been to India to see the Taj Mahal. I've been on a safari in South Africa. I rode a bull elephant in Nepal and watched a wild tiger kill a mountain lion. I have been singing in cathedrals in Europe. I have walked 3 days with a backpack across the Haleakala crater in Maui. I went on a zip line with a spiritual teacher in Costa Rica. I have done, I have been, I have seen, and I'm grateful. And I'm grateful to be alive. And as I learned these stories from my doctors, and they told me 3 things. They said, avoid salt. I said, I like chips and dip. They said, too bad. They said, avoid alcohol. I said, ha! My best-selling book is titled Midlife Cabernet. Not a chance. Then they said, avoid stress. I said, I'm going to be on stage in front of 200 people. They said, come back next week. So with these stories that I've learned, and I'm not traveling, I gave away the suitcases, because if I want to see a documentary, I'll watch it. from home. And as Dorothy said at the end of the movie, as she clicked her ruby red heels together in The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine, and we are so glad you're home. And that music you hear, we all hear it too. That's not the angels calling you to Wendell. That's we all hear it, so don't worry. It's a good thing that I was not your cardiologist, because we all know now that my philosophy is if it's broken, you just rip it out and throw it away. Which, yeah, I guess there's a reason I'm not a doctor. You know, that wheelchair trick used to work at Disney World. You could, people put on fake casts, and then they would skip the line and get on all the rides first. But then they made all the lines handicap accessible. So now there's no advantage. Yeah. But apparently it still works at the airport. So keep your fake casts, everybody, because that's the way you can get through TSA. We've reached the point in our show where we have what we call a story slammer, and this again is open to anybody. You just go back and visit. Looks like it's Ken back there right now. Write your name on a ticket and stick it in the box. We're going to get to those actually in our second act, because I saw an interesting story on the interweb. Is that still does anyone call it the interweb? They do. All right, Laura confirmed. I'm not out of date. An interesting story about not necessarily a person going home, but a something going home and people making that happen. And so I've invited a person here tonight. I believe it's his first time on our Story Night stage. Please welcome Caden Sinclair.
And it is my first time. I appreciate you guys being willing to listen to my short story. I'll keep it to 5 minutes so that you aren't slumping over in your chairs, first of all, and so I don't drone on and on. I do want to say, beautiful job. I have a great appreciation for musical talent, so thank you. So my story involves someone that I wish was here tonight to tell the story. She's an artist that's in New York City. She's building an art piece that is approximately 20 to 22 feet tall. It's a sculpture. I wish I had pictures. The sculpture's a little bit kind of like an Easter Island face, weeping tears that are bird-like, and it's called In the Mind's Eye, so it's very dreamlike. If you can imagine 20 feet, I think the ceilings to about that beam are about 30. So big sculpture. She had originally intended to build this sculpture in Washington State. And the reason she was doing that is because the resources there accommodated her for her welding. There was plenty of other people that could help her. And she was able to go there for what she thought was going to be about a month, maybe 6 weeks. She ended up spending several months, and as is the case with many artists, didn't quite complete the sculpture. So she was intending to take the sculpture back to New York City to complete it. That was based on the fact that the warehouse was needed, her resources were running out, and she really just did not know what to do. So she fundraised and got a vehicle, and the vehicle that she got was, it didn't function very well. So I'm gonna say that nicely. It pretty much the transmission didn't work, the engine didn't work, I believe it overheated. Some of the tires blew, and she had to have them replaced. So as you can imagine, this isn't a great vehicle. On her way from Washington State, she had to go through Salt Lake City, and that was kind of a circuitous route, but she needed to take that route because she was meeting up with somebody that was an additional resource, and also someone that was going to accompany her on the journey back to New York. She didn't make it through Oregon. She broke down outside of Baker, And when I say broke down, I alluded to all the mechanical difficulties. And so she tried to limp it along, and with a lot of help from the locals, she got it to a mechanic shop. She had no ability to figure out a resource to get her any further, and out of frustration, a lot of tears, and feeling very, very alone after all this energy she put into something that she'd been awarded a grant for, people are expecting later next year, she had to give up and leave the sculpture behind. So she made her way back to New York, and in desperation, she reached out to the Burning Man Network, which is part of what she was awarded this grant for. They activated the regional network, which there are people here in Boise, and that's where I'll get to the next part of how this story combines. Here in Boise, we have a nice kind of creative space called Xanadu. And Xanadu is just a collective of artists. We do things like welding and woodworking. Some of the art is actually on here in display at Jump. At the Botanical Gardens, we do a lot of work for Tree Fort. And in general, the community is just sort of there to help each other all the time. It's a really amazing space, and I am so blessed to be part of it. So it didn't really occur to us that this was much of a big deal when we were asked to help. And what we did is we reached out to Lana, and Morgan Sherwood, who's sitting here as well tonight, and I got in the truck, drove over to Baker, which is not that far, picked up her art piece, brought it back to Boise, to Xanadu, which it is now sitting at, and just told her, hey, whatever you need, we'll take care of you. By the way, we have a creative center here in Boise with a welding shop and a huge community of artists and plenty of space. So as we kind of communicated with her, she was extremely overwhelmed with gratitude and realized just how welcoming Boise is as a city, how well we are with our community, and how when it really comes down to it, we help each other. And she's flying out here in January to scope it out, take a look at things, and finish the sculpture here in Boise. And in part of doing that, she may actually leave the sculpture here until it goes on display late fall of next year. While she's here, she wants to meet the community that's kind of responsible for this space. She wants to see the biodome, which is like one of my favorite things because it's filled with orchids right now. And in this climate, walking into a space that's 80 degrees where it's humid and there's orchids in bloom, pretty nice. So this is a story about someone that meant to get home and in an unexpected way has found something that she is gravitating more towards as being her true home for her art piece. Did I fill up my 5 minutes? Thank you, guys.
And Caden, if you would, go visit our story booth over there. They need you to sign a little release form, which gives us the right to put this on our podcast and also gives us ownership of the sculpture. We should see if Lana is in town the end of January. Maybe she could come talk at Story Night next month. Oh, okay. Well, it might have been a good theme for her in January, though, because it's Hooked, Stories of Compulsion. The compulsion to build 20-foot sculptures, and she didn't even make it to the Blue Mountains. Jeez. Poor thing. All right, we're going to move to our next featured storyteller, as I mentioned, who made it a lot further than the Blue Mountains, has been living in Japan for a number of years, and now she's here to share her story of returning. Please welcome Laura Abbott.
Yeah, I'm shorter than the average person. I was almost nervous when I realized I've already made the worst possible public speaking mistake, which was when I was emceeing my company's end-of-year holiday in Japan. I called the company president by the wrong name in front of 400 people. So this is cake. Unfortunately, my story isn't as funny as that one, though. When I was 13, I didn't really believe that I would make it to 20, either by my own hands or by the hands of my mother and stepfather. And my solution to that fear was to leave. First, I left my mother's house and moved in with my biological father in Boise. Then I moved away from both of my parents to a different college town. And then I moved all the way to Japan, where I finally felt like I could live authentically, without fear, in a way that was really freeing and actually did feel like home for the first time in my life. But unfortunately, the nightmares that I had about my parents trying to kill me still made it to Japan. And I had regular nightmares of that nature until very recently, actually. So 4 months ago, when I'm ready to board this plane coming back to the States, it's the right career move. I know it's going to be good for me, but even knowing doesn't really soften that lump in my throat of having to go back, of having to see those people again. But I did it, and here I am. And actually moving back into my father's house in Boise was relatively easy. I knew that going back to my mother's house during the holidays, however, was going to be significantly more difficult. And it wasn't always that way. You know, when I think back to my childhood, I remember positive moments. Things just started getting weird towards the end of elementary school and the beginning of junior high. I didn't really dress the way other girls did. I wasn't really interested in the same things. I remember once I put on some boys' cargo shorts because they had really big pockets, which is great for collecting rocks. But before I could get outside, my mother stopped me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm gonna go collect some rocks." And she said, "Those shorts make you look like you have a penis. Go take them off." So I did. Even my stepmom sometimes would really get on me about how I chose to dress. And even though as an adult now, I understand that my parents were being hard on me in this way to prevent me from bullying, at the time, as a child, I felt like they didn't like some inherent part of me. And that was only the first half of the problem. My stepdad also had a really serious anger issue. He did my entire childhood. My siblings and I were pretty afraid of him, actually, and for good reason. The maybe culminating event of his anger was a time that he almost strangled me to unconsciousness. And I never really forgave him for that, for understandable reasons. I found out how he felt about gay people when I was 14, when, as I was riding in the back of the car in our van, he was talking to my mother about a classmate of mine, John, who was fairly effeminate for a guy. And my stepfather said, "Those people should be hung on a fence and shot." Needless to say, I didn't feel very safe, ever. So I got back to Boise and I thought, I need therapy. And just as it was easy to move back into my dad's house, it was pretty easy to find a really helpful therapist here in Boise. And unsurprising to all of you here, I'm sure, she diagnosed me with PTSD. And she told me that people are traumatized not by going through adversity. People are traumatized when they go through adversity alone. And that made a lot of sense to me because when I was living in North Idaho with my mom's family, we lived, as I like to say, 7 miles from the middle of nowhere and 1,000 feet above the nearest town. And we were so poor that we actually didn't use gas when we went down the hill. We just kind of got in the car and coasted and hoped. And so I wasn't really allowed to go to friends' houses because we wouldn't have gas to get back up the mountain. I spent a lot of time alone. I'm pretty sure I had cabin fever. I often daydreamed about walking off into the snow and not coming back, among other ways of disassociating and losing myself, either temporarily or permanently. I was very lonely. But I wasn't always that way. Eventually, I met an incredible woman who looked like me, who talked like me, who seemed to have the same interests that I did. She was a camp counselor first and then became a pen pal. And as she shared her life experience, as I realized, oh my gosh, I can make it to 20. I can be an adult. I can dress the way that makes me feel comfortable. I can love who I want to love, and I can actually be happy. But my parents weren't so jazzed about me meeting this person or talking to this person. And actually, my mom confronted me once as we were coasting down the mountain to get to school or some other place. She said to me, I just don't like you talking to this woman. She's only 5 years older than you. She's going into childcare, and she's one of those people, so she must be a pedophile. And I think I inherited some of my stepfather's rage, because in that moment I couldn't stop the words coming out of me. I said, if you're going to call her those things, then you have to call me those things too, because I'm gay. And my mother cried. I don't really remember what she said, but we made it down the mountain. I made it to school that day. But what I remember more about that day was getting off of the bus and coming home. It was in the middle of winter, and if any of you have been to the Silver Valley in North Idaho, you know that it snows a lot there. And up the canyon I lived, I'm talking like 6 feet of snow, y'all. It's no joke. So I got off the bus, and I walked in the house, and the lights were dark. There's one light on. I could see up the 3 stairs from the entryway into the living room. It was my stepfather's desk light. And oh boy, all day I had thought about what I needed to pack, because I didn't think I was going to wake up in this house the following morning. So I walked up the stairs, 3 stairs. And there he was, sitting at his desk. He said, I heard what you said to your mother in the car this morning, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you. It's always been really hard for me to balance the need to hold my loved ones accountable for the harm that they've done to me, harm that in very real ways has actually given me trauma that needed to be treated by a licensed professional. To hold that and at the same time hold the ways in which those same people have defended me and loved me. But him saying that one sentence couldn't really make up for a whole childhood of feeling afraid, and so shortly after I moved to my dad's house here in Boise. And then I went to college, and during that time, my stepfather's father died. And even from a distance, I could tell that he was taking it just about the worst way you can possibly take a death, unfortunately. He became really despondent. He isolated himself. His anger got worse when he wasn't on his diabetes medication, which wasn't often because we didn't have health insurance. And he didn't really talk to anyone. I saw him, even from a distance, walk right up to that same precipice to look off into those snowy mountains and think about going and not coming back. And then Trump was elected, and somebody wrote "faggots should die" on the house next door, and I fled again. I fled as far away as I possibly could to Japan. But now here I am, I'm back. We're in October now. I've been talking to this therapist. I'm really trying to prep myself for going, to my family's house for the holidays, and I'm worried about my stepdad. I'm worried because, in college, when I was being really dramatic about my family situation, I used to say, wow, we better hope that he and my mom never get divorced, because if they do, he's probably going to kill himself. He won't have anything left. Well, last year my mom did divorce him. So my siblings and I were really concerned. The morning that I was supposed to receive treatment for PTSD, I was speaking with them, texting, And we really wanted to make sure that we organized some sort of Christmas meeting schedule so that we could show our dad that we loved him just as much as we loved our mom, that we still wanted him in our life. And the whole point of this PTSD treatment was so that I could do that from a genuine, authentic place, so that I could walk into that room and not have the shakes and not feel that thing in my throat, so that I could not feel the way I did standing at the bottom of those 3 stairs. And, we made a plan. I went and I had my treatment, and let me tell you, that really works. I don't get to promote this very often because I can't be like, hey, you got trauma? But if you have experienced anything bad in life, I really highly recommend it. As of a little over a month now, I haven't had a single nightmare and a lot less generalized anxiety. So really do get help if you need it. It was a pretty intense treatment session, I would say. I felt really emotionally worn out, and I went home and was waiting for my mom to call me to confirm the details about Christmas that my siblings and I had worked out. So she calls me in and she picks up the phone, and my stepdad is dead. He's dead. And it didn't make sense to me then. It doesn't really make sense to me now, actually. The cause of death wasn't immediately clear, and it took 9 weeks for them to get us autopsy results. And it still doesn't really make sense to me now because I don't know, there's just some part of me that can't wrap my mind around a 49-year-old with no pre-existing heart conditions dying from a heart attack, but I guess it happens. And even though I know that, it's like a puzzle piece that's just a little bit too big. I can't quite fit it in. It doesn't make sense. And so in the end, I didn't really get the childhood home that I deserved in the first place, and I wasn't really allowed to remake it the way that I wanted to, using my newly gained therapeutic superpowers. I didn't get that either. But I did get something kind of like going home when I went home for the funeral. My 3 younger siblings are all adults now, and we got to kind of rebuild our relationship. It had been more than 5 years since I had seen any of them. They're all great, they're fantastic. They're not listening to this at all. I found out that my stepdad kept a picture of me in his wallet all of those years later. And I got a chance to tell my family that when I leave Idaho the next time, I'm not going to be leaving home. Actually, I'm going to be going home because I've come back to America because I got a higher paying job. I have a partner in Japan, and we want to get married and buy a house, and we want to have kids. And we need a nest egg for that. And my partner isn't even Japanese, so I might not end up in Japan. She's Filipino, so I might end up in the Philippines. I could end up in America, or maybe Japan is the place. I don't know. I've kind of completely thrown away the idea of home as a geographic place on a map. Home for me has been healing myself. Home for me has been really trying to close the distance between the people that mean so much to you. Home for me has been slogging through the mud of the past towards the person you want to become. So no, I'm not home yet, but I'm really trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm gathering that Elaine knows this, but when you have a really rich, complex wine, you need a palate cleanser, and sometimes they give you a saltine cracker or something to when you're tasting. So I feel like we just had a rich, complex wine, and I'm going to offer you a saltine cracker in the form of our season sponsor's message. In 2021, the Boise group is going home like never before and is now focused exclusively on a 100% local model. We serve the world's greatest clients as they find home here in Boise. For our owner, moving our office into a historic building in her old neighborhood is a story of returning. The Boise group is thrilled to bring our exceptional real estate skills as well as experiences like Story Night to the city we adore. We're going to take about a 10-minute break, let you refresh, I don't know if they have saltines out there, but maybe they have popcorn or something. And we'll see you back in here in just about 10 minutes for our second act. More stories, and some of them from you. Thank you. All right, welcome home. The second act of Going Home, Stories of Returning. And we are actually going to have Riley Johnson bring us into the second act with a feature song. And one thing that's interesting to know, you can't see this from where you're sitting, but she has a whole floor board set up with a bunch of switches and dials, and a lot of her music is improvised. So she's creating it for us in this moment. So as we begin, we'll just turn it over to Riley Johnson. Beautiful. This is not the first time that Riley and I have shared a stage. In fact, we were together in the last production before the pandemic shut down theater. We were together at BCT in a show called Slow Food. A little different from tonight. Riley was a Greek cuisine musician who sat in the corner playing keyboard, and I was a waiter from hell, essentially, who the show starts, and my character Stephen, that's Stephen with a PH, takes this couple's order, and they do not get their food until the very end of the show. So it's like in real time. Anyway, we had fun. We are now going to do the thing we've been talking about doing, which is to bring up the Boise group slammer box and draw a slammer from the audience. Yes, we have 2 excited people. All right, very good. Nothing up my sleeve. Also just showing off my shirt pattern here. All right, Boise. We have, it's unusual, but we actually have some people rooting for one of these tickets. It looks like, I'm hoping this is not coming from my iPhone, but it looks like Siri is going to share a story. Siri? Is that an answer to Siri? Yes, okay, good. I wonder what would happen if I said, Hey Siri, tell me a story. Tell me a story.
This is the story of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, we don't want to hear that one. We want to hear this one.
Thank you, everybody. This is always a wonderful event, and I just am honored to be in front of you and tell you a little bit of my life where I got to come home. I spent a year as an exchange student in South Africa, and a pretty tumultuous time in their history. Nelson Mandela was released from prison 2 weeks after I arrived, and it started the changes within their government and their philosophy of life and just so much of those things. I was 16. I thought about jeans and school and the boys that were paying attention or not. And as I look back in my years, of course, that was a stunning time to be there. And I got to be just a normal person there. I went through Rotary Youth Exchange, and so I had a fantastic support system. I ended up with four different families, and still to this day, it is the experience of a lifetime. Nothing has surpassed that in my life. And I learned a different way of life. I was wearing a uniform to go to school. I hated it. We had maids and housekeepers at our home, and we weren't a really rich family. They kept polishing my school shoes, and so I looked new every day. I started hiding them. I scuffed them on my way to school and while I sat in class, and then hid them. I learned about a different way of life that nobody said was better or worse than what I lived. They just lived. And in that time, I learned that M&Ms weren't the only options. There were Smarties. I learned that peanut butter didn't always have the taste and consistency of Jeff. I spent my lunches with my families because school got out in time for lunch, just an early afternoon lunch, where we discussed why peanut butter needed to have a finite mix of butter and honey to make that sweet, creamy balance that most of us know as our peanut butter. It's just an expression of how our life was, or how my life was. These subtle changes, these subtle embraces of how others did in order for them to experience the things that I knew, and vice versa. I learned different slang. Anybody here say "how's it" as you walk by someone you know? That was not a starter of a conversation, just an FYI. Don't start telling them about your day, because they don't care. The way you look at money, the way you look at life in general. I became a middle sibling for the first time. I became the oldest child for the first time. These experiences were new, and I learned to embrace them. And the day that I got on an airplane, at the end of that year, I knew that I was going to forever be marked by that experience. And my life was better for that learning. But I also know, I'll tell you how long ago it was. I got on an airplane, and when we landed in Europe for my layover and plane change, the pilot announced our entrance into the Iraq War. And again, life was changed. I got off the airplane in Fairbanks, Alaska in January, after being in South Africa in January. It was 120-degree change. But my family was there. My friends were there. I was coming home. Thank you.
Thank you, Siri. Please visit our booth over there to sign that release. Thank you. I totally understand defining life in regards to relationship with peanut butter. Totally get that. I'm a Sunday waffle peanut butter and maple syrup person myself, which came from my grandma. I also got to study overseas, which I loved. I hadn't traveled hardly at all until I went away to college, and I did a term in England, in London. And I remember when we landed, we got on the shuttle from Heathrow Airport, and I looked out the window and I saw a gas station, and I was like, hey, look, everybody, they have BP here too. Yeah, British Petroleum. It's British. All right. Let's move on to our final featured storyteller for tonight, Mr. Kevin Winslow.
That's close. Okay. All right. Well, first, I just want to say thanks. Thanks to Jump for hosting us, and thanks to the other storytellers who did such a nice job, and thanks to Jodi for thinking that my story had enough merit to come up here tonight. And thanks to all of you for showing up for Story Night, because I love this event. I've attended many times, but I've never spoken. So yeah, I'm really glad you're all here. So my story is a little bit different from the others in that mine is a little more literal. Basically, I'm going to tell you about growing up in Boise, leaving Boise, and the rather circuitous route that I took to come back. I'll warn you that unlike the other storytellers, there's very little personal discovery in my story, and there's possibly no personal growth. So this is just a rollicking tale. So rather than start at the beginning, I'm going to start at what I would call an inflection point. I don't know if that's a real term, but anyway, imagine, if you will, a cracker from Idaho. That's me. 28 years old. You're loading up a 20-foot U-Haul with all the things you own in the entire world, as well as your girlfriend's. And you have 2 cats and a dog. And you're driving from Boise to New York City to live. And that's somewhat daunting. It's a big country. It takes a long time to drive across, especially in a 20-foot U-Haul, when you're stopping to let a dog get out and do its business. But now imagine that you're driving to New York and you have no job and you have no apartment. And this is in the day before cell phones, so yeah. So anyway, that's where I wanted to start. To go back to the beginning, I grew up here. I'm as much of a native as I can be. I was born in San Antonio, but my family brought here when I was an infant. So I'm pretty much a native. Grew up here in the 70s and 80s. And Boise was kind of a cow town. If anybody's lived here in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't a big city at all. There wasn't a whole lot to do, really, growing up. In high school, you basically had keggers and you got laid. And if you were me, you only did one of those things. So yeah, it was just kind of, I don't know, it was nice. Boise was nice, but it was a little boring. So anyway, graduated from Capitol High, took a couple years off, went to the Harvard of the West. Some people call that Boise State University. It's right over there. I call it the Harvard of the West, but anyway, got the degree, had a girlfriend. I graduated with my bachelor's, she graduated with her master's, and we both wanted to be writers. She wanted to be a writer because she was pretentious and a writer of really bad short fiction, and I wanted to be a writer because it was the only damn thing I was good at. So it's like, okay, what are we going to do in Boise, Idaho? And the answer was very obvious. We're not going to be writers in Boise, Idaho. So it's like, well, where do we go? And she said, well, I lived in Boston. I like Boston. What do you think about Boston? Fine, let's go check out Boston. So we get to Boston, and we're kicking around there. And after about 3 days, we were both kind of bored. Boston's a big city, but it's a little sleepy, oddly. And it's very provincial. And we were like, I don't know if this is the place. And we were looking at the job market, and the job market was, better than Boise, but it wasn't thriving. And then we started looking at apartments, and we were looking at grimy little one-bedroom apartments for like $1,800. And so we started talking. It's like, if we're going to spend $1,800 in rent, let's go to New York. And it's like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. Let's go to New York. So the plan was, girlfriend flies out 2 weeks in advance to get the apartment. And I get the lucky job of packing up the entire apartment, cleaning the entire apartment, packing up the U-Haul, renting the U-Haul, packing up the pets, and driving everything we own out to New York. So along the way, there's no cell phones, so I could check in with her at night from the hotel. And every night I called, did you get an apartment? No. Did you get an apartment? No. And, you hit Oklahoma, and it's like, I'm going to roll into New York soon, and I got no place to live and no job, and it's like, it's a little daunting. So anyway, get to New York, things work out. We get an apartment, not a lovely apartment and not a lovely neighborhood, but clean, warm, roach-free mostly, and we get jobs. We were writing in the online sector, and this was in the very early 2000s, and something happened which some of you might remember called the dot bomb. So there was all this speculation, all these sites were launching, and there was all this hype, and it very soon became clear that a lot of these sites did not have a good business plan, and had no way to make money. And so there was this churn, these sites were coming and going. So in 2 years in New York, we had 3 jobs, my girlfriend and I. And it was funny because we had the same jobs. I would get a job and they'd say, "What's your girlfriend doing?" and bring her in. And so we worked at the same 3 jobs. So after 2 years, we had ascended pretty high. We were both senior editors at a national news magazine. So things were going well. We weren't making a ton of money, but one day I just looked at her and I'm like, "Hey, are you having fun?" And she said, "You know what, I'm really not. I'm really not having a good time." And I'm like, "You know, I'm not really having a good time either. You want to go somewhere?" And so all of our parents still lived in Boise, Idaho, and it's like, well, we're not moving back to Boise, Idaho. So it's going to be the West Coast. So is it Portland or Seattle? And we kind of hemmed and hawed, and it's like, okay, it's Portland. So I call up my best friend, who happens to be in the audience tonight, and I'm like, "Hey, buddy, we're moving to Portland." And he's like, "You're moving to Portland? I live in Seattle. Move to Seattle." And so I said, "Hey, girlfriend, you want to go to Seattle?" And she's like, "Yeah, let's go to Seattle." It's like, okay, well, we're going to Seattle. So again, we get the U-Haul, and we load up everything we own and the 2 cats and the dog, and now we're driving to Seattle. And I just remember the second we crossed the Verrazano Bridge out of Manhattan, both of us just went, we just let out this big sigh, and I just realized how stressful New York had been. And so we took I-90, which is interesting. God damn, this is a big country. God, it takes a long time to drive. And she would be like, "We got a detour off to see the Laura Ingalls Wilder house." It's like, that's a 3-hour, it's like, no, we're not gonna do that. And U-Haul has you on they only give you a certain amount of days to get there. So it's like, tick-tock, honey, we got a boogie, we can't see the ball of string, and we gotta go. So the same thing, we cross over, we see a sign that says "Now entering Mountain Time Zone." And the same thing, we both just let out this big sigh. It's like, God, we're home. So we roll into Seattle, no job, no apartment, again. And things work out. We get a nice apartment, we get jobs. She and I ended up going our separate ways not long after, but I ended up spending 10 years there. And it was Seattle's a nice city. If any of you know it, it's basically just a pocket of neighborhoods. And every neighborhood is basically self-contained. Everything you need is in your neighborhood. You rarely have to go downtown so it's nice there. And on the rare sunny day, Mount Rainier comes out and you can see Mount Rainier. And so anyway, it wasn't until about year 7 that it kind of started to get to me. It is gray a lot, it does drizzle a lot. And one day I realized, I'm like, God, I feel good today. I feel really good today. Why do I feel so good? And it's like, oh, because the sun's out. I haven't seen the sun for like 6 months. So I'm like, I wonder if it's time to go. So I was dating a woman at the time, and I'm like, what do you think about Boise? And she's like, well, let's go take a look. So we come home to Boise, I drive around, and she's like, yeah, no, I'm not moving to Boise, no. And I'm like, damn. So we make it another 3 years, and girlfriend and I are camping in July outside of Leavenworth, and the first day is gorgeous, just spectacular. It's sunny, we have the campsite to ourselves. Next day we wake up, it's biblical rain, as it does in July in Washington, in Western Washington. And so it's like we're sitting in the tent, and it's like, okay, well, do we sit in the tent all day and play cards, or do we boogie? Do we strike camp and get the hell out of here? And so we decided to leave, and she asked me, how many days of sun does Boise, Idaho get a year? And I said, well, I'm not Google or Wikipedia, but I think it's like, I don't know, 300? I mean, you get a lot of, even in the wintertime, it's sunny, you get beautiful blue skies. And she's like, what do you think about moving back to Boise? And it's like, yeah, all right, I think we will move back to Boise. So come out, we did get an apartment this time, but we did not have jobs lined up again. So we pack up the U-Haul with all our stuff, and now 3 cats, no dog. So now we drive into Boise, and we get the apartment, and then we get a house, and things are good. I've been back 10 years. Things are good. My beautiful, lovely mother lives here. My son lives here. I have an aunt, an uncle. So I'm entrenched. My lovely girlfriend, her entire family's here. So we've got roots. She's a native as well. So, but I'm getting the itch again. And here's the reason why. So Boise to me is in this weird nebulous zone. So it's not the cow town I grew up in, for sure. It's a city now, but it's not a big city. So, and by that I mean, of course it's not New York and it's not Seattle. It could be a Seattle someday, but there's no pro sports. We don't have an international airport. We don't have any public transportation. We have a good arts community, but it seems like that we're getting to be a big city without the advantages of a big city. And we're starting to get some of the disadvantages of a big city. Traffic is not fun. The cost of living has increased exponentially. Yeah. Case in point, I sold my house in the North End December of 2019, so 2 years ago, for $455. I looked up the Z estimate today, $755. So a $300,000 increase in 2 years. And it's like, okay, well, that's a good size increase. What has Boise done in the last 2 years to warrant that kind of increase? Do we have a robust public transportation system? No. We tried to build a stadium, that got struck down. We tried to improve our aging library, that got struck down. The city's in a little tiff with the Boise Art Museum right now. So, starting to look around. And Jodi and I talked, and what he really found interesting was, a couple of months back, I'm driving down what is now the concrete jungle of Myrtle, headed towards Whole Foods. I mean, it's just like slab, 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 apartments. And I got this weird feeling that, it's like, well, those are like $1,500, $1,600 studio apartments. And I'm not going to be living there. And I just got this feeling, it's like this town is kind of, whereas I had outgrown Boise, now I feel like this town's kind of passing me by. And it's a weird feeling. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to live in Boise. It's not looking like I'll be able to afford a house again. And I'm not paying $1,600 for a 400-foot studio. So that's kind of where I'm at now. There's a song lyric that I like, and it says, "The point of a journey is not to arrive." And I feel like I haven't arrived. And I feel like there's another chapter yet. And the next time I move, I'm going to have a job and an apartment. That's what a wise person does. So anyway, that's my story. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin and I actually share quite a bit of crossover. We both grew up in Boise in the 70s and 80s. I've worked and lived in some of the same places you mentioned. But one of the moments that I think is maybe pretty unusual, if I heard this right, is I think we have both driven a U-Haul across the Verrazano Bridge, that's pretty weird. And I also had a sense of and I drove across at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is not ideal. But that feeling of, And the other thing that was, and I drove that U-Haul from Brooklyn to Boise. And it was interesting coming across. Our first stop was in Pennsylvania, and we stayed in this horrible hotel, which I went into the bathroom and closed the door, and there was a large stained T-shirt hanging on the back hook. But the further west we got, the nicer and nicer the hotels. In fact, Wyoming, it was almost like, let's stay an extra night. It's so beautiful here. All right. let's get that slammer box. And I understand there's actually a chance that we might hear from someone from Wyoming. I don't know. We'll see if we get there. Nice hotels there. Okay. Surprisingly hard to hold on to. Okay, we've got Adeline Glover. Adeline Glover. Here she comes. You know, the other thing is, if you drive down Fairview or Main Street, I always forget which one goes which way. There's the Torch Club there that had the sign that said girls, 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 but it had an apostrophe in it, like a possessive, girls. And I kept wondering, girls what? Girls what? Girls what? They've since fixed that, but Kevin, at the beginning of your story, you said you put all your stuff in the U-Haul and your girlfriend's, and I did not visualize that possessive apostrophe. So I was hearing a whole different story there. Whole different story. But we're here for Adeline. Come on up.
Okay, hi. My story is less of a memoir as everyone else's has been, but yeah. Mine is about a pixie named Rose, and she lives in a scary forest called the Dwarf Forest. It's from the Land of Stories, and she woke up one morning to the very dim sunlight that could only shine through the crowded trees of the forest. And she watered the small flower that she had planted, the only flower in the whole forest. And she went out for another day of trying to find some berries to eat. She flew as high as she possibly could above all the trees, and in the distance she found the tips of a small golden castle. Curiously, she continued to fly towards it, and she saw the most beautiful kingdom she'd ever seen. It had blue flowers and water and all sorts of fairies flying about. She soon lost track of time and hurried back to the forest to the mine for another day of school. Today's lesson was taught by two dwarfs, Happy and Sleepy, so as usual, Happy was doing all of the teaching. So the lesson was on building your house. They were talking about how to build a proper home out of wood and branches and things. And the way they were calling it home in the forest made a question arise in Rose's head. What if home isn't where you're from? So she continued through the lesson, and once she got home that night, she watered her flower again before going to bed. The next day, Rose wasn't sure if she wanted to stay in the forest anymore. She went back to the kingdom, and she took her flower with her. The flower really weighed down the flight and made it really hard. She eventually got to the kingdom and planted her flower in the forest, by the lake. She then built a new tree house, just like the dwarfs had taught her, but in the proper place this time. Rose had finally found a home. Then.
Adeline, was that an original story? Is that one that you've made up yourself? Okay, very good. Wow. Felt very, very metaphorical. Unfortunately, I kind of feel a little jealous because a lot of my classes were taught by Sleepy, not by Happy. Often they were the football coaches or PE teachers who were doing chemistry or health class and answered questions like, "I'm not quite for sure on that," was their response. or they took roll for half of the class period, which I did not get that until I taught a class later in life, and I was like, aha, that's what you were doing. Yes, bring up the Boise group. Thank you very much. Click ship. Oh. Yeah. What the heck is happening here? Oh, I got it. Okay. All right. We are looking for Ben Redman. Ooh. Enthusiastic chair. Okay. Here, I think maybe what I've been hinted at is that we are heading to something from Wyoming now. I'm not sure. I haven't met Ben yet. Hi, Ben, welcome. Great. Happy holidays. Amazing. Here you go.
Ho, ho, ho! Ho, ho! How y'all doing tonight? I love you guys. These are great nights. These are great events. Yeah, 2 summers ago, I did over 3.5 grams of cocaine in under 20 minutes. Then I had a seizure. Then a ruler used me to do more. Then I had a second seizure. I died. Well, someone saved me, and that's why I'm standing on this rock. This place is not our home. This place has never been our home. If you guys haven't noticed, things are going downhill. Well, guess what? They're going to keep going downhill. The reason this place is not our home is because there's a ruler of this world, a ruler who's been ruling it for over 2,000 years. If you've ever felt like you can't make a difference in the world, you're wrong. You can. I need your help building a fire. This fire will one day burn him alive. This fire will one day eat him alive. Then for the first time in all times, this world will be for us. Then for the first time in all times, things will be right. Then everyone will see what this ruler is made out of. He's made out of nothing but lies. Then everyone will see what the truth is. We're the greatest things that exist in the entirety of the universe. We're the greatest things that exist in the entirety of all that exists. Then this world will be our home. Then we're all going to party together forever. This fire will only grow greater and greater forever. There's something I need to tell you guys. It's going to be impossible for any of you to believe me right now. But be happy every second of every day, because what I'm about to tell you is true. Jesus is going to return in less than 17 years. I wouldn't know anything. I only know what God told me, and what I told you is true. So be happy every second of every day. This ruler uses religion to blind us. Sin is not what this lying world says it is. Sin is what authority figures do. I'm not done yet. Sin is what your parents did to you. Love is what matters most. The face of sin is the book of law. I love you guys. There's one more thing I need to tell you. Please don't get the vaccine, and if you've already got one, then please don't get another one. But hey, I love you guys.
Are you from Wyoming?
Oh, yeah.
What brings you to Boise?
Oh, I have to share this with you guys.
Oh, that's all right.
You bet. Well, hey.
All right.
Great advance.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm looking for another saltine cracker. Do we have another ticket in the box there? We don't know what we're going to pull out of this box.
Hey, I'm from Wyoming. I don't know that guy.
That's what happens, right? You're from somewhere and they're like, oh, do you know David K? David K. David K. Here comes David, wearing a festive sweater. It's not an ugly sweater. It's a saltine sweater. Oh, okay.
Wow. How about you? Hi. Hello. This is a lovely event, my first time. Wow. Thank you for your eloquence. Really. What a night. What a place. My first time in Jump. So, I want to dispel a rumor and then celebrate a myth. I've lived in many, many corners of this fine country. It's really, really fun. This is a great place. It is. I've traveled too overseas, but America is a great home, as you know. Born in D.C., but I was so small when we left that it's a place where I learned many, many years later backstage that I was born in the same hospital as Dave Chappelle. That's the only relation to that place for me. Amsterdam, New York was next, and that's the kind of snow that starts in October. Thank you, Northern Idaho. I'll leave it to you. It starts in October, it doesn't end until April, and it's amazingly cold and depressing and what have you, but cold. Cool, good friends. We left when I was 8, but what a time to embrace real people. One of the myths I want to dispel is that you can't go home. Not too long ago, I went to Saratoga Springs to see a concert, and rolling back towards somewhere, I looked at the map. I said, oh, Amsterdam, I haven't been there. And by the way, I've always had a dream of finding the love of my life and taking her to all these dots. So you guys are the love of my life tonight. Amsterdam, New York, lost the battle that so much of America is going through, I guess. Drugs. It's a city no more. They lost City Hall. They sold City Hall. It was so overtaken with opioid abuse and use, and it's a city no more. My dad was one of those guys that would have a job and then he'd be looking for a job not too long thereafter. It seemed normal to me. He was just cutting things out of the Wall Street Journal. I don't know. But we went to Dover, Delaware next, the capital of our first state. And that's where my brother learned racism. He went to a high school that was predominantly black and he couldn't hang, and he's never come back. You know of people like him, closed-minded, it's all happening to him, misogyny slips in and what have you. But to me, Dover, Delaware we had a backyard. Hell, I mean, connected to other people kicking the can. It was so fun. And I don't want to go home there. That's not home. But it was a cool 2 years. Moved on up to Pennsylvania. And by the way, take it easy on Pennsylvania and bad hotels. And it's a great place. Pennsylvania is warm. Pennsylvania has so many, people say, oh, where are you from? Reading, Pennsylvania. Oh, that's an hour 20 from, I got to tell them it's near Philly because everybody thinks it's Pittsburgh. And no, man, there's so much going on. It's huge, like Idaho. You can just drive to different corners and see different things. And I know more about Philadelphia history than anybody I know. I used to do 15-minute videos about certain historical spots that would beam into 6th grade classrooms all over this great country. And it was called Geography, History, and the Urban Riches. That was my first hit. So that was 4th grade all the way up through Reading, Pennsylvania, outside of Reading. It was called the suburbs. Maybe you've heard of them. 4th grade all through till college, and then I went to Temple University, and I finally landed in a city. Got my city on. You see, when you move into a city, or you're from the burbs, or you live in a hick town, or you're from nowhere, or you find racism, the thing I want to propel as truth is that positivity works, right? A positive outlook on things, here's the saltine part. A positive outlook really can get you by and can make you thrive and can make the people around you better. And I'm just here to share that. Boom, off to New York after 9 years in Philly and finding my way. And New York City is the bomb, right? It's so fun. Jazz clubs are open till 4. And one night on a Tuesday, I got a haircut. That night, I was taking salsa lessons. They were over at 11. And the guy at the salsa, hey, you can go practice till 1 o'clock in the morning. It's Tuesday. I still can't salsa. Thanks.
Hey, but look what you can do at a Tuesday in Boise, Idaho, huh? It's Tuesday. I forgot to, it made me think of that when I left New York, my apartment in Park Slope, I had bought a beautiful plant that I had in my bedroom, and I left it for my roommates, and I told them, listen, I'm giving this plant to you, but don't worry if you can't take care of it like I did, if it doesn't thrive, if it doesn't grow, if it doesn't live, because I've named the plant racism. And they let me know later that it was dead. We're still working on it, though. All right, we are moving to our closing of the show here with our closing theme song. And what a night this has been. What definitions of home we have had. And this is a phrase that we've started saying at all of the shows, but tonight it has more meaning in terms of the land and home, and that stories come from the land as well as its people. And I do want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Shoshone-Bannock people and the stories that happened here. Story Night is supported by public funding for the arts through the Idaho Commission on the Arts, the Idaho Legislature, and the National Endowment for the Arts. We also receive funding from the Boise City Department of Arts and History. Remember that you can listen to podcasts from all our shows on iTunes, even Elaine's story back from 2010, Dog Days of Summer. That is available on Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, or go to storystorynight.org and click on the podcast link. We also have a radio show. It's Story Night on Stray Theater, which you can hear on Sunday before our live show from 5:30 to 6. And if you want to see previous shows, it's all up on our YouTube channel. Thank you to our crew, technical director, podcast engineer, Stephen Baldessare. Thank you to Riley Johnson. Thank you to our photographer, Chelsea Harada. Thank you to our volunteers and our volunteer coordinator, Natalia DiJosia, which has taken me 8 months to learn how to say that last name. Thank you to our board of directors. Thank you to our story subscribers. Thank you to Jump and the crew here for hosting us. Tuesday, February 1st, we're going to have a workshop which will teach you story night, story good night, beginning, middle, now at the end. Authentic, inspiring, spontaneous, very spontaneous tonight. So thank you You shared your stories and you really listened. I might have come here as a stranger, but now I'm leaving as a friend. And so the stories never end. Thank you. We'll see you next January 25th. Hooked! Stories of Cravings and Compulsions. Tickets available tomorrow. Good night.